Remember those faces from classic 1970s TV, the ones that seemed destined for superstardom, only to vanish right after their first big hit? It's the kind of Hollywood disappearing act that leaves you rewinding reruns and asking, whatever happened to them? Was it a twist of fate, the price of fame, or just one of those industry secrets nobody ever wants to talk about? Buckle up, TV detectives, because we're dusting off the archives to reveal the real stories behind 10 stars who rocketed to fame, then ghosted the spotlight faster than a canceled pilot. Ready to find out who made the list? Let's dive in. McKenzie Phillips, one day at a time. Some careers burn bright, fizzle, and leave behind a trail of what could have been. McKenzie Phillips is one of those cases that still has TV fans scratching their heads. When she burst onto the scene as Julie Cooper in One Day at a Time back in 1975, McKenzie seemed to have it all. Charisma, comic timing, and the kind of rebellious energy that made every episode feel a little bit unpredictable. She played the wisecracking daughter who pushed every boundary, but also carried a sense of vulnerability that made her more than just a sitcom troublemaker. The series itself was a snapshot of changing American family life, a divorced mom, her two daughters, and all the messy, modern problems that came with it. McKenzie wasn't just acting out a script, she was becoming a voice for a generation of teens who saw themselves in her stubborn, flawed, and totally relatable Julie. Audiences loved her, ratings soared, the show felt real because she felt real. But as fast as she rose, McKenzie's time in the spotlight started to unravel. Behind the scenes, she battled personal demons that turned into public headlines. The press hounded her about every misstep, every struggle. In 1980, at the height of the show's popularity, McKenzie was abruptly fired. There was no dramatic on-screen exit. She just vanished. One week, she was America's favorite TV rebel. The next, her character had simply run away. The show soldiered on, and McKenzie made a few brief returns, but the magic was gone. Attempts at comebacks fizzled, and Hollywood, always hunting for its next new face, quietly moved on. For a while, it seemed like McKenzie would be remembered only for her fall rather than her talent. But here's the twist. Even though she disappeared from the big TV scene, her story stuck with fans. She later re-emerged as a writer, speaker, and advocate, never quite recapturing sitcom glory, but proving that sometimes the real-life battles are bigger than anything scripted. McKenzie Phillips didn't just vanish. She left a mark that's still part of TV history's more complicated chapters. Gregory Sierra, Sanford and Son, Barney Miller. If there's such a thing as scene-stealer energy, Gregory Sierra had it in spades. Whether he was lighting up the screen as Julio Fuentes on Sanford and Son, or bringing a different edge as Sergeant Chano Amenguale on Barney Miller, Sierra became a fixture in two of the decade's sharpest comedies. He could turn a simple punchline into a moment you'd remember, and his characters always felt a little more layered than the scripts let on. In a television era packed with stereotypes, Sierra's performances had a depth that made you want to know more. Sanford and Son gave him a national platform. As the upbeat, long-suffering Puerto Rican neighbor Julio, he played the straight man to Red Fox's grumpy Fred Sanford, surviving the kind of zingers that would have left most actors flattened. But it was never just about laughs. Sierra gave Julio a realness, a sense of life outside the set. Fans loved him. Critics took notice, and suddenly he was everywhere, so much so that when Barney Miller came calling, Sierra jumped at the chance to break out of typecasting. Sergeant Chano Amenguale on Barney Miller was another game-changer. In a show celebrated for its smart writing and unforgettable ensemble, Sierra fit right in. His character was tough, principled, and occasionally haunted by the job. In one of the series' most memorable episodes, Chano's emotional reaction to a traumatic shooting gave viewers a glimpse into the raw, unpolished side of TV's thin blue line. For a moment, it seemed like Sierra was on the cusp of joining TV's top tier. And then, almost as suddenly as he'd arrived, he was gone. Sierra left Barney Miller after only 2 seasons. No dramatic exit, no public feud, no string of juicy headlines. Just gone. Hollywood loves to recycle its stars, but for Sierra, the follow-up roles never measured up. He did guest spots, small parts, and the occasional film role, but the mainstream spotlight never found him again. For viewers, it was like seeing a great athlete retire after their rookie season. Gregory Sierra became one of those actors everyone recognized, but nobody quite knew what happened to. He never recaptured the consistent magic of those first two roles, but to anyone who watched 1970s television, his face is stamped in memory. A classic case of the right talent at the right time, who left us all wanting more and wondering where he went. Susan Dey, The Partridge Family. If you grew up watching TV in the early 1970s, there's a good chance Susan Dey's face is burned into your memory. As Laurie Partridge, the quiet but cool older sister in The Partridge Family, Dey was every teen's dream crush and every parent's idea of a role model. She didn't just play the keyboard, she played the heartstrings of a nation. When the Partridge Family bus rolled onto the screen, Dey stood out with her shy smile, natural poise, and a sense that she was always thinking a step ahead of her TV siblings. The show became an instant pop culture phenomenon, and Susan Dey was suddenly, almost overnight, America's it girl. But after The Partridge Family wrapped up in 1974, Dey did something truly unexpected. She disappeared. Sure, she made a few appearances in made-for-TV movies and the odd guest spot, but she steered clear of any role that would echo her Partridge past. Rumors swirled that she was done with the industry. She skipped reunions. She turned down offers to revisit Laurie Partridge. The truth? Dey was determined not to be typecast, but Hollywood had already decided her story. It wasn't for lack of talent. Dey had dramatic chops, but back then, TV could be merciless. The transition from sitcom teen idol to adult actor was a path littered with casualties. Susan Dey spent the rest of the 1970s mostly out of the spotlight, quietly building a life far from the chaos of network television. Her return to TV years later in L.A. Law in the late 1980s proved she still had it, but for more than a decade, she was a classic case of whatever happened to. Today, Susan Dey remains a bit of a Hollywood enigma, someone who cashed out her TV fame at its peak and never looked back. For the Partridge Family generation, she'll always be Laurie, the girl who kept the band together and then walked away without ever looking back. Michael Gray, Shazam. Every kid wanted to be a superhero in the 1970s, but only Michael Gray actually got to do it, at least on TV. As Billy Batson on Shazam, Gray was the all-American boy next door who could transform into Captain Marvel with a single magic word. The show hit Saturday morning like a bolt of lightning in 1974, mixing comic book action, road trip adventure, and the kind of earnest life lessons you could only get from a guy who hangs out with an ancient wizard. Michael Gray wasn't just acting. He was the avatar for every kid's wildest dream. Shazam! Didn't run for decades. It lasted a mere 3 seasons, but it made a massive impact. Gray's Billy Batson was likable, relatable, and believable, even in the middle of all that comic book chaos. The show's cult status endures to this day. But here's the twist. When Shazam wrapped up in 1976, Michael Gray didn't move on to a new blockbuster. He didn't land another starring role or headline a primetime drama. In fact, he faded from television almost instantly. It wasn't from lack of trying. Gray auditioned, made some guest appearances, and even did a little voice work. But Hollywood is a tough place for former kid heroes, and the doors just didn't swing open the way they once had. His image was frozen in time. The eternally youthful Billy Batson, destined never to fully grow up in the public's eyes. Over time, Gray embraced his place in TV history, occasionally popping up at comic conventions or making winking cameos in modern superhero shows. But for most viewers, he's forever that guy from Shazam, the face you remember, but the name you always have to look up. Michael Gray's story is a lesson in how fame can be both a gift and a cage. He played the hero, then quietly exited stage left, leaving fans to wonder where the magic word went. Deborah Lee Scott, welcome back, Cotter. Some actors seem destined to bounce from hit to hit, but Deborah Lee Scott's story was more of a flash in the pan. She exploded onto the scene as Rosalie Hotsy Totsy on Welcome Back, Kotter, a show that defined cool for a new generation of TV fans. With her infectious energy, quirky delivery, and undeniable charisma, Scott brought the Sweat Hogs world to life, and audiences couldn't get enough. She had a way of making even the smallest lines stand out, stealing scenes with a single eyebrow raise or a perfectly timed wisecrack. But almost as quickly as she arrived, Scott's time in the spotlight faded. After a season and a half on Welcome Back, Kotter, her character quietly disappeared. No big farewell, no send-off episode, just gone. The reasons were classic Hollywood: creative shifts, new directions, and the ruthless turnover that comes with ensemble casts. Scott tried to keep the momentum going, moving on to roles in quirky comedies like Angie and the notorious satire Mary Hartman, Mary Hartman. But neither show had the staying power of Kotter, and the offers for starring roles soon dried up. By the 1980s, Deborah Lee Scott's once rising star had all but vanished from network TV. She found work in guest spots and as a game show panelist, but never reclaimed the regular spotlight. Still, Scott remained a pop culture footnote, a symbol of how quickly fortunes can turn in television. Fans who remembered her from those early episodes always wondered why she never got a bigger shot. Her story serves as a cautionary tale. Sometimes, the break you get is the only one you'll ever have. Scott's TV journey is a reminder that, in Hollywood, fame can be fleeting and fairy tales rarely go as planned. Her star may have burned out fast, but for one golden moment, Deborah Lee Scott was unforgettable. Jan Michael Vincent, The Survivors. If you ever needed proof that being good-looking and talented in Hollywood isn't always enough, just look at Jan Michael Vincent. Before he was flying helicopters in Airwolf during the 1980s, Vincent was supposed to be the next big thing in the early 70s. His big shot came with The Survivors in 1970, a glossy, soapy drama starring Lana Turner and Ralph Bellamy. Vincent played the son of a powerful family, all swagger and soft focus, and he looked every bit the matinee idol. Critics buzzed about his potential, and TV fans started paying attention. This guy was built for stardom. But here's the twist. The Survivors was canceled after only 15 episodes. For Vincent, it was a gut punch, the kind that derails a career before it really starts. He bounced from one project to another, doing the Hollywood shuffle with bit parts in TV movies and short-lived shows. In an industry obsessed with youth, Vincent was suddenly the guy from that show that flopped. The phone rang less and less. His film career got a small boost, but he couldn't crack the top tier. Vincent's story gets even more complicated as the years pass. When he finally found another lead in Airwolf, more than a decade later, he was battling personal struggles, industry burnout, and an image that Hollywood had already written off. He became known as a what might have been, a cautionary tale for any actor who thinks one hit will carry them through. Despite flashes of brilliance, his career was a roller coaster of lost chances and tabloid headlines, never fully landing back in the primetime spotlight. Jan Michael Vincent is a reminder that timing is everything in show business. He had the looks, the talent, and the buzz, but one show's early cancellation sent him down a path that left him always on the edge of a comeback. For a while, everyone expected him to be the next big thing. Instead, he became a Hollywood mystery, famous, forgotten, and forever tied to a show nobody remembers. Kathy Coleman, Land of the Lost. Every generation has its adventure show, but for kids in the mid-1970s, nothing was weirder or wilder than Land of the Lost. And at the heart of that prehistoric chaos was Kathy Coleman, who played Holly Marshall, a plucky, smart, and perpetually in peril teenager dropped into a land of dinosaurs and strange crystal-powered pylons. With her wide-eyed energy and fearless attitude, Coleman made Holly one of TV's most memorable Saturday morning heroes. Kids everywhere tuned in not just for the dinosaurs, but to see what wild situation Holly would navigate next. For 3 seasons, Coleman lived every child's fantasy and nightmare, battling Sleestacks, making friends with Chaka, and running for her life at least once per episode. Land of the Lost was campy, creative, and the kind of show that glued kids to the TV, yet it was also her only major acting credit. When the show ended in 1976, Kathy Coleman did what almost nobody expected. She left the business entirely. No TV movies, no follow-up sitcoms, not even the parade of guest spots that most former child stars rack up over the years. Coleman stepped away from Hollywood just as quickly as she'd arrived, making her one of the true one-hit wonders of 1970s television. For decades, fans wondered what happened to the girl who outran dinosaurs and outsmarted sleestacks week after week. Rumors and convention appearances only added to her mystique, but she never tried to reignite her acting career. Coleman's story is one of rare TV vanishing acts. She starred in a cult classic, then left that world behind, choosing a quieter life far from the cameras. But to every fan who spent Saturday mornings lost in a world of adventure, Kathy Coleman will always be Holly Marshall, the girl who survived the land of the lost and disappeared on her own terms. David Cassidy, the Partridge Family. Some TV stars are born to play a role, and then that role traps them forever. David Cassidy was the ultimate teen idol as Keith Partridge on The Partridge Family. With a mop of hair, an easy smile, and a knack for turning bubblegum pop into chart-topping hits, Cassidy captured the hearts of millions. His face was on magazine covers, lunchboxes, and just about every bedroom wall from coast to coast. For 4 seasons, he wasn't just playing Keith Partridge. He was living the dream that every kid in America secretly wanted. But when the series ended in 1974, the dream began to unravel. Cassidy was determined to leave the teen heartthrob persona behind. He tried everything: serious acting, solo music, even stage work. But for all his efforts, Hollywood wasn't interested in David Cassidy the grown-up. He got a few guest roles here and there, but the machine that had built him up as Keith Partridge couldn't imagine him as anything else. Cassidy's post-Partridge years were a battle against his own image. He faced industry skepticism, fickle fans, and the cold reality that teen fame doesn't last. His music career held up longer than his acting prospects, but by the late 70s, Cassidy's days as a household name were over. He never landed another regular series, and he never stopped trying to break free from the Partridge shadow. To his credit, Cassidy embraced his pop culture legacy later in life, making appearances at reunions, concerts, and nostalgia conventions. But the lasting impression is of a star who soared to incredible heights, only to find that coming down is the hardest part of all. David Cassidy vanished from primetime, but he never left the hearts of the generation that grew up singing along. Robbie Rist, the Brady Bunch. For a brief, shining moment, Robbie Rist was the kid everyone was talking about, though maybe not always for the reasons he'd hoped. When The Brady Bunch needed a boost in its final season, producers rolled out the ultimate trick in the TV playbook: add a cute, precocious new kid. Enter Cousin Oliver, played by Rist, with his oversized glasses and even bigger energy. He was supposed to save the show, but instead, he became famous for something else entirely: the so-called Cousin Oliver syndrome, TV's term for a late-series character meant to bring fresh life, but who instead signals the end is near. Rist made Oliver memorable, bouncing through the Brady household with cheerful lines and a can-do attitude. For a handful of episodes, he was everywhere: lunchboxes, magazines, talk shows. Then, almost overnight, it was over. The Brady Bunch wrapped, and Rist's moment in the TV sun faded. Unlike other child stars, who at least got a second chance, Robbie Rist's run as a household name ended with his last Brady credit. While he did find steady work as a voice actor in animation and commercials, the world that watched him in primetime moved on. No new sitcoms, no teen idol years, no reunion shows starring Oliver. The spotlight drifted away, leaving Rist to become a classic trivia answer: whatever happened to Cousin Oliver? For fans of TV history, he remains the definitive one-hit wonder, someone who burst onto the screen, became a running joke for a generation of writers, then disappeared just as fast as he arrived. His legacy lives on in TV lingo, but for most viewers, Robbie Wrist is frozen in time, forever standing at the Brady kitchen table with a grin, waiting for a callback that never really came. Erin Moran, Happy Days. For a stretch of the 1970s and early 1980s, Erin Moran was America's little sister. As Joni Cunningham on Happy Days, she grew up right before our eyes, starting as the kid at the dinner table, then coming into her own as the show's breakout teen star. Audiences loved her blend of sweetness and spark, and Happy Days was such a hit that Moran was trusted with her very own spin-off, Joni Loves Chachi. It seemed like the doors of Hollywood were swinging wide open. But when the spin-off fizzled and Happy Days finally wrapped, Moran's career took a dramatic turn. Unlike some of her co-stars who landed on their feet, Moran found the transition out of one of TV's most watched families almost impossible. Casting directors saw her as Joni and little else. Roles dried up. Moran tried the occasional guest spot and the odd reality TV appearance, but she never again found her footing in the entertainment world. The challenge for child and teen stars is always the same. How do you grow beyond the character the world loves? For Erin Moran, the shadow of Happy Days proved impossible to escape. Over the years, she faced personal struggles and tough times, making her story a bittersweet example of how quickly fame can fade. Hollywood can be relentless, and despite the affection of millions of fans, the industry simply moved on. Erin Moran's story is both iconic and heartbreaking, a reminder that for every star who conquers television, there are many more who slip quietly into the past. For fans, she'll always be Joni, and her disappearance from the TV landscape leaves us wondering what could have been if Hollywood had given her a second act. So there you have it, 10 stars who rode the rocket to fame, only to disappear from our screens when everyone expected a lifelong spotlight. Some tried to reinvent themselves, some faded by choice, and some just got lost in the shuffle of TV history. Who do you think deserved a second act? Which missing star would you bring back for one more episode? Drop your theories in the comments, hit subscribe if you love uncovering TV's best mysteries, and let's keep the conversation rolling. Because in Hollywood, a comeback is always just one episode away.